Oh, wait, where did I put my lucky rabbit's foot? So my partner and I do a talk show called the Lucky Rabbits Talk Show, where we interview readers and people who are kind of on like the psychic side of things, intuitives. My name is Prudence. You can call me Prue, and I'm super excited to have our guest today, like a really prolific author, a creator of her own tarot set. But I'll let her introduce herself.
Oh, thanks, Prue. It's great to see you and to share with your community as well. I'm Bridget. I'm founder of Biddy Tarot, and we are really an online tarot education community where we are teaching people all around the world to use the power of tarot to manifest their dreams, to really transform their lives, and just to make a really positive difference in the world. So yeah, basically just raising global consciousness, day by day, that's all.
Yeah, and I should say also, a podcaster. I think you have like two podcasts now, right? Is it just the Biddy Tarot and you're starting a new one?
Oh, yeah. So we've had Biddy Tarot podcast for, I don't know, maybe 6 years. And then I also have the Intuitive Entrepreneur podcast. Now, both of those are currently on hiatus because I'm focusing on some other projects. But yeah, we have two different podcasts.
That's so awesome. I will say, so my tarot journey kind of started I in high school, and I remember the tarot card deck that I had came with a little book, and I didn't really quite like that little book, and so I went online and I was looking up, and you had a blog at the time. And I think I was looking back, and I think it was like 2011 or 2012. So you've been on quite the journey.
Yes, well, I appreciate you being on that journey with me because I remember like Biddy Tarot back then looked very, very different to, what it
Yes.
looks like now. And actually, that was the time maybe a couple of years before I decided to leave my corporate job. So at that point, I was working in corporate. I'm 2011, I had my second child that year. And yeah, life was very different. It was very much a hobby. And now it's turned into this, global kind of education business that is serving like tens of thousands of students and then millions of people through the website. So, yes, it has been quite the journey.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of tarot card readers. So when I started, I found a group of them who kind of adopted me in and like got me into the professional sphere. I'm 1 year into being a tarot card reader. Um, but they talked really highly about your certification process and like the certification overall. They said it was like really comprehensive and just kind of congratulations for where you've gotten to. It's
Yes,
really cool.
thank
I know.
you.
This is a book that I could recommend to anyone. I every time I drew a tarot card, I would go online and Google Biddy Tarot and that tarot card. And I remember you had the whole description and the upright and the reverse, and it was very in depth. And I like begged my family for Christmas 1 year. I was like, I've just been Googling it over and over, and it's all in here. And I really can't even go over how much I would suggest that to people because you go into health and relationships and careers. And I know that you've done other books and journals recently. Do you want to talk about any of them?
Yeah, so it's great to see actually that version because I think that was one of the OGs. And so this is
Yes.
the ultimate guide to tarot card meanings. I think since then I'm just looking on my bookshelf. We have another like different cover. But yeah, I've also just recently launched. Oh, let me grab it. This one, Intuitive Manifesting, which is all about how to use tarot to really manifest and create like your future. Because I don't really buy into the whole thing of tarot as a fortune telling tool. I'd much rather not, I don't want to predict all the bad stuff or good stuff or whatever that's going to happen and then be completely helpless. I want to be able to create my future. And that was really the premise of this whole intuitive manifesting book. And then, yeah, we've got other books there's Intuitive Tarot, like how to actually read the tarot, and Everyday Tarot as well, which, I shared probably about 6 years ago, how to bring tarot into our everyday practice. So yeah, all of them are really linked by that desire to bring tarot into the mainstream, to be able to normalize tarot, and to see tarot as more of a like personal growth and development tool than a predicting the future. Because yeah, I'd rather see people empowered, and able to make their own decisions and create their future, versus when you're just kind of told like, oh, this thing's gonna not work out, like, and then you go, oh, what am I meant to do with that? Like, I would rather
Yeah.
know that you can
Um,
control how things go.
You also have a good process of kind of gearing people towards productive questions that I know because I was listening to your podcast. I haven't been as much into podcasts, but I was working overnights and I would listen to it a lot, and I really appreciated that that push towards it's not yes or no's, it's not what's going to happen if, it's kind of more of a like dig deeper and ask yourself better questions.
Yes, because really, like, in order to get really powerful answers, you've got to have powerful questions. If you just ask a crappy question, "Oh, will I fall in love?" And then you go, yes or no, how
Yeah,
does
get a
that
magic 8 ball, right?
yeah, that's it. But if you ask, like, what is it that I'm seeking in a relationship? What will I start to see when I am falling in love, when I do know that it's like for real? What is it that I can do to bring more love into my life? Like those types of questions, it's a whole different energy around it. And that is what helps you to really empower yourself to create your own future.
Yeah, I know with my clients, I usually do a Celtic cross because I'm still kind of new, so I do kind of like a by the book formulaic one. I know my mentors had to like tear that book out of my hand. They were like, "You know this by now." I mean, after reading it so many times, it like it just took the confidence of understanding, especially because I know usually you're looking at the card and the card will tell you what you need to know about it. And so if you have a basic understanding, you can kind of do that. But with my clients, I'll always say that the future position is on the path you're on now. And then I'll go through and unblock all of the reverses, kind of, I'll tap it and I'll say, well, this is something we have to look at. If you do better with this, hopefully the next thing will kind of turn. And then the future position, this is kind of how you can change that. But I know for me, yeah, like that mentality that you, as like as a mentor or like a teacher, really instilled is has helped my clients a lot for sure, because I'm
Mm.
able to kind of be like, it's not about, my thing is, it's not about prediction, it's about prevention, preparation, and patience.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, awesome. And it is, isn't it? Because it like when we look at that future card in the Celtic cross, it's based on where are you now, the actions that you're taking right now. This is where it leads to. And the neat thing is you can go, I don't want that outcome. That outcome seems horrible. No thanks. And then you go, great. Well, how do we shift things up? What needs to change?
Yeah. Is
How
the
can
block
we
in your home life? Is it in your past? Is it kind of in your, because I look at the crowned position as like your subconscious and the what's below you as the conscious manifestation of that. And so in
yeah.
that you're really able to kind of see where the dots connect and get like a very full picture. But yeah,
Mm.
it's about preventing what you don't want to happen by developing yourself and evolving. I think tarot is a great tool for that.
Yeah, yeah. And, it really brings in more conscious awareness and more intentionality, because what I love most about tarot is that it shows kind of the stuff that you may not be aware of. It's like revealing these hidden insights. And the beauty is, as soon as you can bring it from the unconscious awareness into the conscious awareness, that's where you can start to take action. And so if you go like, okay, let's just play like, oh, well, what's blocking me right now? And I've got Page of Wands. Well, maybe it's just I don't know where to start. I don't know how to just get started on my journey. And you're like, brilliant. Yes, that's what's been blocking me. I've had the feelings, I've had the symptoms of like, I just can't get started. But now I realize, like, maybe I just need to take that first step, right? And then maybe you can pull another card and go, oh, it's Knight of Cups. Interesting that's following the page, because it's kind of like the progression of that. Well, maybe I need more inspiration, creativity with those cups cards. maybe there's someone who's inviting me to take that next step, and I just need to say yes to it. So it all brings this into our awareness, and then we can find, what's lighting me up, what I feel energized about, and where can I start to move forward.
Yeah, I will say the deck that you're using, I have one right here. When I first got to my mentors, they were giving away decks, and I was like, I've always wanted that one. Is a great one for if you're an online reader or like digitally working because they're so legible. I know for me, like I use just like my phone camera, and I was using these really ornate kind of golden ones that were shining and too much. And those ones have really come in clutch just to be simple. It's a
Yes.
great design.
Yeah,
How did you go about designing it?
yeah, so this is like our Biddy Tarot deck that we have self-published actually, and I've always loved the Rider-Waite deck. It's always been something that I've used throughout my whole practice. It's where I got started, and then I kind of gravitated more to the Radiant Rider-Waite, and I, loved it, but I also was like, oh, these colors. I put the cards on the website. I'm like, oh, it doesn't really go with our like teal and purple and kind of a bit more of a modern vibe. It's all these like reds and blues. And I thought, how could we have something a bit different? Now, the other part too is I love the simplicity of Rider Waite and the symbolism. But also, when I teach people, I like to just focus in on, like, even if we can simplify it even more, just focus on the things that actually really count and matter. It helps to really activate the intuition more. And so when we were designing the Biddy Tarot deck, I really wanted it to have a Biddy Tarot like aesthetic and theme to it. So it's got all of our beautiful colors. So that way it looks really nice on the website. Um,
Or yes.
Funnily enough, like we originally just intended to create it just for the website as a digital deck. But then, of course, my mind goes crazy because I'm an entrepreneur and I think, oh, let's just create like a whole physical deck. And so we did. But also, what I wanted to do, yeah, is just simplify quite a lot of it. And even you'll notice, like on the cards, there are no like faces, there's no kind of expressions. And that is really about, like, you can make it whatever you want it to be. And I think sometimes having the blank space is this invitation in for our intuition to come into gear and, be an active participant. I think also, even just like these two cards here, we've got the Page of Cups, the skin color, variances. The Rider-Waite Smith is a very white deck. And we
Which is
wanted to
ironic because the artist was a person of color.
right.
Pamela, yeah.
Yeah, and so even like justice, different skin colors really important, and sometimes different genders, and all of the things that kind of just make it a little bit more relevant, but also keep to the traditions of what I think is a very like tried and true deck of tarot. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to point out too that they have no faces because that's kind of like the teddy bear thing, right? Like teddy bears have solid or no facial expression. That way you can impression or children can impress themselves on it or
Oh,
project
interesting. I
it.
didn't know that. That's cool. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I will say, so when was your first interaction with tarot cards or like how did you find tarot?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, even just as a teenager, I would do all this crazy stuff. Like I would literally wake up at 4 in the morning and I would do candle gazing because it would help activate my psychic powers, I thought. And I would do these, like, the ESP cards, the extrasensory perception. You had to
Yeah,
try and guess, like, what's on the other side.
I'm so
And
bad at those, but I have a deck.
I'm usually about 33% accurate.
Yeah, I
um,
can get three out of it usually.
yeah, 1 out of 3. And yeah, I would really try to do all of this stuff that would activate all these powers, special powers. Wasn't very successful at it. But what it did do was really activate my interest in spirituality. I did try out religion for a little bit, and realized I was not going to do well where I was told what to think and believe, and I really needed to find my own path. But where that led me is at 17, I was about to go to Germany on a high school exchange. And my friend and I were like, okay, let's find out what's going to happen when we go on this exchange. and we had a tarot reading. And I remember in that reading, the woman, she was a very typical tarot reader, dark room, dark eyeliner, like mystery and whatever.
The whole
And
show.
yes, exactly. And she pulled a card and it was the Emperor card. And she's like, "Oh, you're gonna fall in love in Germany." I'm like, "Oh yeah, whatever. Okay." But then
That is,
I go to Germany. I'm like, "Oh, I fell in love a few times, some wonderful emperors over in Germany." And I was like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I could learn it when I get home." And then I started teaching myself tarot from there. And pretty quickly, I realized this is not just one of these, party tricks that people show on TV and in movies. There's quite a lot of spiritual, threads in this. And the more that I've worked with tarot, the more deeper my appreciation has been for this tool. And now I completely understand, like, this is such a representation of the human psyche, on a level that is just so beyond what we could ever imagine. It's incredibly
yeah,
deep.
absolutely. And I mean, it'll always amaze me how out of 78 cards, certain cards will come up over and over at certain times, and then they won't come up other times. When I was younger and I found it, I was really kind of scientific minded. I've always been really interested in, first it was astrology and then palmistry. Both were so complicated that I ended up finding tarot and kind of I was like, well, I actually really had very little faith at first. And then as I used them, they kind of proved themselves to me in a way that I was like, if you're scientific minded, the thing is, you do the scientific method. If they hadn't worked for me, I wouldn't have kept using them. But through my observation, they've been amazing. One thing that's really cool is the first tarot card I ever drew that ended up leading me to your website was the Aerophant. And it was at a time that I was trying to look for signs places, right? And I was drawing about this interview of like just because I was nervous, and I actually got the Aerophant for the first time in so long, and I was like, everything's a journey, and they really can be comforting. There are times where they can really call you out on things and tell you the things you don't want to hear. I've definitely drawn cards sometimes and been like, I know, I get it. Can I get some more information? But
That's usually when I like accidentally fly, oh dear, they all fell off the table. Okay, yeah, must get some new cards.
That's so,
Good work.
yes, I actually had I had two fall out and they have just been following me. It's
Mm.
crazy, but it's nice to see when they come up over and over again because it kind of shows that you're still focused on something or you're still moving through something. It can be really assuring, even if it's confusing at times, really.
Yeah, I've had a client experience where it's like the card just repeatedly shows up. We think that together we've worked through the stuff and shows up next session. You're like, oh my gosh, okay, let's go deeper, And I think this is what I also love, like with tarot, and deepening my own practice with tarot cards, is I'm going beyond just like, oh, here's the card, what does it mean, blah blah blah, but then using it as an inspiration for a practice of some kind, a ritual, a visualization, a ceremony, whatever it might be. And I've found that doing that helps to clear a lot of this stuff. So, for example, the devil card showed up with a client, and we went through a really powerful visualization where I had her actually step into the three different positions in the devil card to be the one that was trapped, but then to also be the oppressor. And, what did that feel like? And it just unlocked a whole lot of insight and a whole lot of appreciation, actually, for this particular situation. Like, oh, okay, so I think he was just wanting to be supportive and helpful, but I was placing myself in a position where I made it to be like limiting and restricting. It was just, yeah, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It was very eye-opening and insightful.
That's an amazing one because I had an interview, one of the first people I was interviewing, we were talking about growing into relationships and going through relationships that don't work out, and the fact that a lot of it has to do with when you stop focusing on what you think was done to you or what was done to you, and you start focusing on, I mean, and obviously this isn't for like physical abuse or anything, but addressing what we've done in relationships is really the best way to step into healthier relationships. And with the devil card, that's an interesting one, especially if you're looking at it like, were you both in bondage and kind of were you participating in that? Because it's not just about bondage, right? It's about dehumanizing others, and kind of that's why they've grown tails and different appendages, and dehumanizing your partner is really part of that kind of cage that we build inside of a relationship. That's a
Yeah.
really beautiful thing to do.
Yeah. And, again, tarot is supporting that because it's just the visual nature of tarot, the symbolic nature. It already has the whole concept, the archetype, the philosophy, the beliefs, like all of that is already interwoven into that card. And yet you can use this simple card to then unlock all of that in the client. You can start to just look at the symbolism of the imagery, and then that unlocks a much deeper knowing and a deeper awareness that's already in this kind of matrix that we are sitting in, but just through that one card, through one little window. Just love it.
Yeah. And then as time goes on, hopefully you draw different cards, and they get more positive, because there definitely is, I have a hard time saying that there are negative cards and positive cards, but there definitely are cards that portend better places to be emotionally, spiritually, financially, and that's part of the thing, right? Of encompassing the psyche of a person is you can touch on so many different archetypes, and you can touch on like those four main parts of your life, right? That are like creativity, conviction, compassion, and literally like commerce.
Yeah, I love it. You're great with your alliteration. It's brilliant.
That last one, I wasn't sure if I could pull it out, but
It's fantastic. But yeah, and I think one of the interesting exercises to do with the tarot cards is to pull out those that, most people think are positive. So, get the sun card or the star card and then go, okay, what's the shadow here? What's the kind of the negative to this? And then go and pull out all of the bad cards, the tower, the devil, and go, okay, what's the gift and the blessing in these? Because it gets your mind as a tarot reader to be a little bit flexible and to see that everything in life always has light and shade. Even the things like when we have awesome times in our lives, what's the shadow to that? What's being kind of initiated in that process as well?
one thing that was really eye-opening for me, specifically with the tower, I don't like to do generalized readings, but I was doing one for America in 2025, and the tower came up in the hopes and fears section. And I really realized and judgment was in the how we see ourselves, and the world was in the future position. And so I was like, wow, we're really stepping into something that's going to change and be a complete kind of reset. But we as a collective are focusing on not just the hope that the tower falls, but the fear that the tower falls. Um, and then also just sorry, I wasn't sure what popped up, but also that the tower has to fall, right? That's the kind of the classic message of the tower, is that the foundation wasn't meant to be built anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I always just remind myself, if you're in a tower moment, the next card in the tarot deck is the star card. So all of that crumbling is all so that it can lead us to a point of transformation, of full authenticity. Being naked under the stars and bringing back into the authentic self. But I think it's so interesting with the tower, and particularly I also want to speak to like Celtic Cross, that hopes and fears position is a tricky one. A lot of people go, well, which one is it? Is it a hope or a fear? I'm like, well, actually, what if it was both? What if
Our
both were
hopes
true?
are our fears. That's what I
Yeah.
always tell my clients is that what we're hoping for, we're afraid to not happen, and what we're afraid of, we're hoping won't happen. And in that, they're so entangled, our hopes and fears.
Yeah.
It's a really illuminating position.
Yes. And yeah, I think, with the US, again, I'm only an outsider, so I don't know what it's like. I don't know all the intricacies and so on and so forth. But just watching from the outside, sometimes I think, like with the tower, it might feel like it's disastrous, but it is actually it's needed. Sometimes you need certain things to prevail so that they can actually crumble in on themselves, right? And
Yes,
it needs to be
absolutely.
allowed to kind of build the tower in such a way that the tower is not going to be the thing that actually works, so it crumbles. And a lot of people are like, oh, maybe we should stop everything. Like, this has got to stop. But I actually think sometimes you need to allow things to happen, even if it's on a trajectory at the time that doesn't feel right. I
Mhm.
trust in this whole universe that everything is happening for a reason, and it is happening so that it can recalibrate, and re-envision itself, and again lead into that star place of the stripping back and just being back into what actually matters.
Yeah, astrologically too. So I do astrology too, and I've been doing astrology forecasts specifically I'm from Maine and so I'm running them for there. But Uranus is in a position or forming an aspect that lately has been underlying deep inequalities in society are being highlighted by the change in like the collective. And I think that that's something that, right, like we have a shaky foundation with inequalities in societies, and at least they're being highlighted to a point where we can address them. I mean, the whole thing is a little bit messy even to kind of like talk about spiritually, but yeah, that shaky foundation has to come down at some point, whether it's from the storm or the foundation itself.
Mm.
That's a really good point and a little bit comforting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're
And sometimes I think the polarization needs to happen to create the harmonization, because
mm,
in polarization, it's, the pull duality, it's pulling of both sides of kind of like needing to find their balance point. And balance point is just, yeah, where's that recalibration? Um, and what is going to be, what is going to be in the like this in the sort of long-term state, and it's hard to kind of articulate, but I just feel like, I get a little bit like anxious. I think, oh my God, where is this world going? Like, are we pulling apart so much? And that just creates, the more you pull apart, the more conflict that's in the middle. And I really believe in, like, where's that harmonization and balance point? That's kind of the ideal. Even if you just think of, say, like masculine and feminine energies, finding the harmonization, not making this such a feminist world or such a masculine world. It's neither. We shouldn't be fighting, I don't think, in my opinion, for one or the other. I think we're fighting for what's the harmonization. Where can we have both divine masculine and divine feminine working in harmonization? And so I think the
right.
polarization shows where things are out of balance on both sides and how we can bring that back in again.
Yeah, and what I'll say too is in that same reading, yeah, death, the world, and judgment were all there. So it's got to be a new time. And when you see, I mean, death is like the one that people really freak out about, but it's always kind of that's one of the bad cards with a great silver lining, right? Is something has to end. And it's the kind of that
Mm.
same energy of the tower where it's gotta fall to be rebuilt. But when you see the world, anytime I see the world, I really see it really touches my heart a little bit. When I was graduating college, I got the world. I mean, almost every time I pulled tarot, and so the world has a special place in my heart.
Yeah. Do you know one of the authors I came across a long time ago, he would talk about the world as kind of like this portal in between, spaces, almost like the birth canal, actually. So even though we often think
Yeah.
the world as being like completion and everything's finishing, you know that as soon as you walk through that wreath, you're born into another whole state of being, and there begins the fall again, right?
Yeah.
And every ending creates a new beginning. And also, I do like, if it's so interesting you're pulling this for US 2025, such powerful cards. But to me, that's kind of, yeah, what portal do you need to like move through to transition into something else? Because where it's
Yeah.
at currently is, it's crumbling.
Well, and a lot of it's so weird that I can remember these all so vividly, but a lot of it was cups reversed. A lot of
Mm,
it was, I think the conscious position was the King of Cups reversed. So like just like an uncompassionate kind of authority. That's how I read it. It was way before things were going on. But and the Ten of Cups reversed. The Ten of
mm,
Cups reversed was in there, and I kind of read it as like if we aren't taking on like the lessons of compassion and bringing them through to like the younger generation, then the younger generation's not going to really feel too much love. And
mm.
that's like it blocks that flow of like generational compassion that I think as a nation you really should have. Children are
Yeah,
the future is what they say.
yeah, yeah. Wow. Sounds extremely powerful. All of the
It
cards
was
that you pulled.
like I said, I usually stray away from like general readings or pulling for things like that, but that one really kind of clicked for me. I don't think I got too many views on it or anything, but even if it was just for me, it was kind of nice to see it, really.
Well, I reckon bring it back because I think it'd be interesting to bring it back a few times this year when things start to unfold. And like this is the thing about tarot readings, right? When you read for a client and maybe your client goes, "Oh, yeah, whatever, that doesn't ring true," um, then sometimes coming back to that later on can start to reveal like even more insights. So you might find this with your community as well. Maybe when you first shared it, it didn't quite land, but maybe now or in the next few months, more things might be more revealed, more relevant.
Yeah, and anytime you have a message that's like kind of a productive message, it's worth kind of trying to push it through.
Yeah.
On that note of readings that don't resonate at the time but end up, I did one for myself at my residency. I have a woman who kind of like adopted my practice. I go there every Sunday for in-person stuff. And I didn't have any clients, so I just did a reading for myself. And it was about traveling, not really looking at leaving things behind too much and like moving forward. And I'm not quite saying it right, but it turned into this trip to Canada where this whole kind of process unfolded. I've met so many interesting intuitives and like my practice has grown and at the time I was like, well, I don't really feel like I'm going to be traveling. It's the Eight of Wands, right? That like one of the little subtexts is small travel for business.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all coming up and it was I don't know. I had no intention of leaving at the time and it was kind of a beautiful moment of I pulled it back up when we were about to go on the trip and I was resharing it and I was like, you guys, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, but once it all starts happening, it's happening.
Yeah. And that's also about trusting your intuition as well. Sometimes this stuff doesn't make sense at the time, or it might seem completely illogical. Like maybe it's like, why on earth would you even travel at this time or whatever? Um,
Yeah.
and just trusting that no, something's pulling me for some reason. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to go with it and let the magic be revealed to you. I think that is where we can start to expand beyond just current reality. We can embrace these new opportunities that are coming in.
Yeah, I just drew the Queen of Cups and I was actually looking at this book and there's a quote that you have under the Queen of Cups that's from I don't want to say this wrong, but Lao Tzu and it's intuitive understanding will protect you until the end of your days or something. And that one really clicked for me at the point of reading that. But I will say back to your journey. I know that so you started in the corporate world and you kind of brought that corporate energy through and building your business. Did you kind of feel like you were following like your intuition and it was clicking and it just felt like more of what was the feeling of it?
Yeah, so I quit my corporate job in 2012. And at that time, I was doing really well in corporate. I was working up the corporate ladder, had a six-figure salary. I had good kind of leave to take care of my kids. And I remember walking in there, I'd survived a redundancy. They'd cut the workforce by, I don't know, 20% or something. And, oh, you're so lucky that you made it through. I'm thinking, you guys are idiots. But anyway,
That's so funny.
I'm lucky. But yeah, I remember just walking in and going, that's it. Here's my resignation. Oh, why would you do that? We've saved your job, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I don't want to. This is not for me anymore. And they're like, okay, so what are you doing next? Are you going to work for a consulting firm or another corporate? I'm like, no, actually, I'm going to start my tarot website and read tarot. And they're like, are you insane? And I was thinking, yeah, you probably think I'm crazy, but I know that I'm not, because I knew something in my gut was telling me, just do this. You've got it.
Mhm.
Luckily, by that point in my tarot business, I was already generating pretty close to the same amount of income, because through readings, but also website traffic was giving advertising revenue and so on.
Yeah.
I didn't make the leap, with zero income. I knew that I could actually replace my income pretty easily. And I had a few backup plans as well. So that made it easier for me just to trust. But I put in a few challenges to the universe. I said, like, you got to show me a few signs, and then it would. And then I'd be like, okay, show me another one, please. Was that a fluke? And then we'd do another one. I'm like, okay, one more, please.
Yeah.
But
But if
yeah,
you're on the right path, you kind of get those signs, definitely. If you
yeah,
ask for it, and it does feel almost sometimes like you're asking too much, but at the same time, if you're called to, I've had a couple of people I've interviewed refer to it as being called to serve. If you're called to serve, then they're gonna keep pushing you and helping you.
yes, yeah, 100%. And then, after 2012, like the next year was traveling. We're in Spain with my family for like 6 months, just traveling around. And that's when I hired my first team member. And yeah, Biddy Tarot really started to grow from that point. I'm quite business oriented. I have a very good strategic business mind. I love business, but I'm also spiritual. So it's this kind of really unique blend between the two. And yeah, I was keen to grow a sustainable long-term business that wouldn't just be like a sole provider. I wanted to have a team. So, now we have, I think, 15 people who work in Biddy Tarot around the world, and they're really bringing the vision to life, which is awesome. Yeah, but I think also what's interesting about tarot as a business is, tarot is a very intuitive and creative space to be in. And sometimes when you're trying to create a business, it's not always creative and intuitive, right? You got to
Yeah.
balance that with productivity and, getting stuff done and so on. And when your passion for something becomes a job and something where you need to earn a certain amount of income doing it, it can be a fine line between, am I still really passionate about this, or is this starting to become a burden on me? So I've had some experiences along the way that have just shown me that friction point. But really, it's been about putting in place different kind of energy management, self-care, bringing in team to take on certain tasks, things like that, and just staying true to what's the real purpose of what I'm doing here.
That's so cool. I will say a lot of people talk about how every step of the journey is a step that leads you to the next place. And it sounds like even if the corporate world wasn't quite great for you, it taught you a lot about what you needed, and it gave you the skills and the experience to be able to be where you are, which is like
Yeah.
really cool.
But you know what? I had to also really decondition myself, because in corporate, I
Right.
think it's quite a masculine culture. And I mean that from an energetic perspective. And, the way that I would write, I was very academic and corporate. And so a lot of my early blogs, which you must have encountered at some time, very kind of like academic and
Yes.
so yeah, these last 10 years has been kind of deconditioning myself out of that and being more flexible, more intuitive, allowing more flow, and so on.
This is a good example of that, I would say. And I will say that's one of the things that I would tell people. I actually a lot of the advice that I've given people over my time, like, because once you're into tarot, people will ask you like advice and stuff. I would always say, throw away the little book and Google Biddy Tarot because it was all right there for free for you to go through and it was more information. But one of the things I would always tell people is you're very well read. You had all of your sources and resources, and you would like quote like Carl Jung and people who I can't quite remember. It was a while ago, but you always had sources, and I, as a skeptic to begin with, I needed that for sure. But to be able to move past it and into a place where you're able to kind of just incorporate more intuitivity and be more open towards kind of representing just how you feel versus the intellectual side is like it's quite the journey to have been on for sure.
Yeah. 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 It's been very powerful. And even my team I'm probably quite grateful that I'm going on this journey because I used to be quite, like, oh, we've got these certain goals, which was great, very ambitious. But now we're allowing more fluidity to come back in. But yeah, it's interesting too, because I think for many of us, we are conditioned through our schooling, through, education, uni, if you go to university, all of that kind of conditions us to go a certain path and to be like more of that scientific. But we have to kind of unravel a lot of that and go, is that actually true? Do I want to be that way? Or is there a different pathway here? And what's that going to look like? And how can I, yeah, just tap into my intuition, my inner wisdom a lot more?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I'll say that's actually pretty similar is when I was had that third shift job, I was working overnight. I was listening to your podcast. I was listening to a couple mediums and an astrologer I like. And I was like, man, I've been doing this for so long. I think I could do this. And I had to have like eight or so many checks, really. Like my partner and I went all the way down to Salem to go see a medium, and she was like, why aren't you doing this? She drew my cards and I was like, "Oh, but this is what that one means and that one." And we were having this conversation and she was like, "Well, if you can do these things, why don't you?" And then from there, it just took kind of following my gut, and then I found it was really like a rapid fire process, but it was also that moment of I was going into my job, I was due for a promotion. It felt like, why would I leave this thing where it's more reliable? But my gut feeling every time I walked in was just like, why are you here? You gotta go. And so as soon as I trusted that, it kind of just snowballed, catapulted, however you want to put it, into one thing to the next.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you do have to trust your gut, really. Even and the cards will be there, right? One thing I want to ask is, was there like a card that was coming up a lot for you when you were asking for those signs?
I don't think it was a specific card, but I do remember that I would do all these tarot readings on like, should I leave my job? Or, what would it be like if I was a tarot reader full time? And initially, all the cards were coming up reversed. I was like, oh, okay, that's not a good sign. Maybe I shouldn't be doing anything yet. And then it literally like overnight switched where every reading I was doing was like upright, upright, upright. I'm like, oh my God, okay, fine, I'm listening. And then I
Yes.
remember I was like, I had a dream where I was telling one of my best friends, like, oh, I've just left my corporate job, and I felt amazing. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a sign. All right. And then I had these income goals each month. I'm like, okay, universe, if you're serious about this, then help me make this amount of money. And I'd be like, ping, okay,
Nice.
easy. And then we go again, ping, all right, one more time. um,
Yeah.
but it's the thing, right? Because I think often the universe is sending us so many different signs, and we're either completely oblivious to them or we're skeptical and going like, oh, that was just luck, that was something else. And it can
So
take
easy to ignore them.
yeah, it can take a little while to go, okay, no, I think this is it. I think it's time to like actually take action here. Which I think is healthy too. It's just because the flip side, I've heard people go, oh, well, I couldn't do that because my intuition told me not to do that. Or they might have an online course. I had to stop halfway and just stop offering it because my intuition told me not to. And I'm like, really? Was that actually your intuition? Was that something else?
Yeah. Well, with the blocks for you, I would imagine that if you were getting the blocks, you were addressing them, right? There were probably a lot of things you had to move through, step through, learn. And so tarot is very constructive energy. The energy of the cards is very, very constructive, sometimes to like almost like a judgmental point, but we do love them. And if you were getting all of those blocks and if you do listen to it, then it's almost like an act of love on their part to show you what you were blocked in so that you could get to where you got to.
Mm.
That's actually really cool that it wasn't because I was wondering if you were going to be like the high priestess was coming up all of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny you talk about the high priestess because she has come up in the last few years, and particularly through some of my deeper journeys and meditations, she would just keep appearing to me over and over. I remember the first interaction I had with her, where I was like, "Oh, I love you, high priestess. You're so amazing," and she's like, "No, Bridget, you're amazing." I'm like, "Oh," and then she starts like going like, "You are the high priestess," and she starts adorning me with all of her robes and her crown. I'm like in tears. I'm like, "No, I don't know if I could do it." And then it was a number of journeys where I just kept continuing to meet the high priestess, and we would, over time, we just became more and more like partners until I was really embracing her energy. And actually now she's, you probably can't see it, but she's on
Oh,
my
nice.
arm. Yeah, so I had
That's so cool.
tattooed on my arm as my guide. And yeah, so that one's been really powerful for these last few years.
That is so interesting. And it's really interesting. I draw all of our guests because it's the Lucky Rabbits talk show as a rabbit. And I usually one of the last questions I ask is what I would draw, like what rabbit would you be drawn as? And I was sketching before and I drew the rabbit as the high priestess sitting there.
Oh,
And I was going to do you as the high priestess, like a little rabbit sitting on top of books because you've written books, like to incorporate little things. And so I'm gonna do that one for you. I like that.
I love it.
That's awesome. Because at first I was like, that's really interesting. At first I was like, is that kosher? She might think that that's like a little bit too elevated for a position, but I love that that's come up. I think that we're pretty much running out of time, but for any of our listeners who don't know where to find you or how to support you, do you want to go through kind of the list of what you've been doing?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So you can come on over to biddytarot.com. And so there you find all of our tarot card meanings. So if you ever get stuck in a reading, you can just look up a card meaning. And the way that it's written is just super practical and everyday. But we also have a number of different tarot courses and programs depending on where you're at. So you find that at biddytarot.com/shop. The other really neat place to stay connected is our Instagram profile, so at Biddy Tarot. Why I love it is because we often share really cool tarot spreads that you can do. So even the full moon, new moon, and some other ones that might be good to include in your practice. And we're always sharing like tarot tips and tutorials over there as well. And yeah, it would just be awesome to really connect. I think in this kind of world, it's more important than ever for us to stay connected and stay in community. And I love that we have that opportunity to do so across the entire world. I'm just seeing that vision of us all holding hands across the world and staying connected that way.
Yeah, that also, not to go back to the astrology, but that's we're just facing an aspect with Pluto that has to do with new leadership being controversial, but also being able to connect with each other on a global scale, which is beautiful. I will say for anyone who looks you up on Instagram or like needs that extra push, also if you want to learn tarot, you share just like a couple cards a week or like one or two, and then you'll go into so with 78 cards, it's a lot to learn or it can be intimidating. But with something like that, where one card is being shared a day and you're getting kind of a feel, that's a great way to learn for anyone who's like too intimidated right now, is just like follow her on Instagram.
Yeah, do that. That's awesome. Beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely.